First, we take a look at some of the top business stories today that are moving the economy and markets. And one of those involves chemicals and explosives and fertilizer maker Omnia, whose shareholders have backed plans to restructure its balance sheet and to sell, or I should say, issue 2 billion rand worth in new shares. Now, the company previously raised outrage after some analysts, I guess, found issue with it after making a surprise request for more shareholder funding. And earlier in April, they had said they won't need this funding. And to take a look at this story and other business stories and moving markets on this Friday, I'm joined by Independent Development Economist Ndumiso Hadebe. Pungani, welcome, my brother.
Thanks for having me, Ayabonga.
Thank you so much for joining us. Pungani, let's start off here with Omnia and maybe just, unpack for us a sequence of events. Because we saw in April, they came out and said, on the back of the acquisitions that they'd gone out to the market to sort of acquire through debt, that they wouldn't need any other sort of tinkering with their balance sheet and that they felt that they were well capitalized. And then 37 days later, they come out in a SENS announcement saying they're going to need 2 billion rand in a rights offer. What's happening?
Omnia's case is, Ayabonga, is a classical case of neglect of their fiduciary duty on the behalf of directors and management at Omnia Holdings. And this is particularly seen by simple issues such as the remuneration structure of the executives and the board of directors in that particular company, where remuneration is at a point of around 60 to 40% ratio. But even that remuneration takes place when performance of the company is not necessarily complements that kind of remuneration structure. But also, there are also other issues that we've had in South Africa as well, particularly if we relate it to the auditing profession, where you find PricewaterhouseCoopers has been their auditor since the year 2002. And of course, it brings into question, again, this very important role of auditor rotation of particular companies that are listed, such as Omnia, because you then tend to see that individuals tend to then operate these businesses as family businesses, and yet, according to the Companies Act, they have specific fiduciary duties in which they have a duty to care and to be considerate of how they manage their business, but also the monies of investors.
And Pungani, one gets a sense that this is on either side. It's not just the auditors. I mean, PwC in this case has been with them since 2002. But we also see a few of the directors there who have been there for the last 16 years or so. And I guess, if you go beyond the decade mark, it can't still be said that you are independent.
No, certainly. And I think in the letter that was written, they cited a piece of research that in essence suggests that if a director, an individual director, has been adding value in a particular company for over 8 to 10 years, post that period, the likelihood of them adding value becomes quite limited. But also at a human level, once you've built or you've established yourself in a particular organization for a long and sustained period of time, you end up gaining a sense of ownership of that particular institution, which becomes quite difficult to have a certain level of independence, which there's a very thin line when it comes to that. Yeah.
Let's take a look, I guess, at some of the operational issues here. We know historically, the fertilizer business and the explosive space and even, of course, some of the other spaces they play in are cyclical businesses. So, if there's a drought and agriculture is not doing as well, probably people are not going to be demanding as much of the fertilizers that Omnia creates as they would if you didn't have that drought or you had a much better situation for agricultural firms. And yet, on the back of that, knowing we have this drought, knowing we have low demand conditions in the economy, and knowing all manner of challenges that the economy continues to face, it surely mustn't have been the best time to go out and acquire 2 different entities, which have been, to be honest, spectacular flops.
Indeed, they have. It's quite intriguing for me as to why they made those particular transactions, given the scale or the business cycle of those specific industries. I mean, even if you look at the type of markets that they operate in, they need to be well geared in order to buffer the times when there's a downward business cycle in those particular markets. And you find that they actually doubled their debt and interest payments with regards to investments that they made and their operations in those sectors, which for me, it does not make prudent financial management sense on the side of the management. But also, I'd be interested to find out what informed the due diligence or the considerations that they undertook when undertaking those transactions.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of this rests on the erosion of shareholder value. And we know in this particular instance, much like with Steinhoff, that a sizable chunk of the equity of Omnia is held by the Public Investment Corporation, which invests on behalf of many public servants who are watching this particular show right now. And if somebody's sitting at home, one of the big questions they'll be asking is, does this bite my investment and does it potentially hit the outcomes when it comes to my own pension.
Well, it certainly does have an effect, but I think because it's at a company level, it wouldn't have, from a proportional or a scale perspective, have the same effect, such as a Steinhoff or an amalgamation of these companies all at one go. But it certainly does have an effect because as pension holders, you receive annual prospectus in terms of the envisaged returns of your pension monies. And of course, given on the targets that have been set, it does have a dent in terms of the amount of money that you're able to get at the end of the day once you retire. But it also raises a very important corporate governance question in South Africa today, and oversight bodies and their role, but also how the role of individuals who are in the roles of directorship of very important companies, how they're also monitored in their conduct in accordance to good corporate governance within these institutions, particularly those where the PIC and other state organs are invested in, as it has an impact on individual South Africans.
Ndumiso, you touch on the important role of oversight. And one gets a sense that, on the one hand, the board exercises oversight over the management team, which has done all manner of things that are inexplicable at this point in time, least of all misleading the markets in terms of how it communicated and an impact on the share price. But yet today we've heard a resounding approval of that rights issue on the part of the shareholders. And I must be asking myself, what is it that the shareholders are seeing here that the rest of the market isn't?
Well, perhaps given the financial position of the entity right now, given the type of transactions that they undertook, I would say without conducting a proper due diligence and having an independent perspective with regards to some of these transactions. But secondly, it's almost a situation where they need to rescue the situation, as it were, through the, sourcing equity to recapitalize or ensure that they're able to stabilize their balance sheet, as it were. That can be risky if, again, the corporate governance issues are not attended to. There's some directors or non-executive directors in the company that have been there for some time. And of course, Ayabonga, we know if we've been in business for some time, we build a certain level of friendship. The level of independence and in being able to be prudent and diligent when it comes to certain issues, it lowers down over a period of time. And that becomes an important deterrent to the performance of such companies, particularly at a strategic decision-making level and in the growth and expansion of such a company.
Let's pause there for a second, Pungane.